Small may, in fact, be the new big, because being a part of a small team, it's super agile, it's super fast, and it may also be super tiresome. But today, we're talking with Bryant Underwood. Bryant, welcome to the show. Bryant, you're the Senior Event Director for PULSE, and that's a title. That's awesome. So today you're going to talk to us a little bit about how a small team is doing a lot of really big things. And so I think for those that are watching, maybe they're part of a small team, or maybe they're part of a big team and they're feeling challenges on either side of that.
Sure.
Today we're going to talk about how in the world are you guys doing some of the things you're doing with the team size that you have. So welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me. Yeah, it's interesting. Pulse is a team of about 35 to 40 members. Sometimes during our different campaigns, we can add contractors to that. But still, we're part of, in some capacity, almost 200 events a year. And, those do vary in scale. Some of those are smaller pastor gatherings, but some of those are in arenas and stadiums and, even other large venues. And so the challenge is, how do we continue to run at a very fast pace, not burn out and spin a lot of plates?
Yeah. Are you burnt out?
No, I'm good right now.
Okay. All right. Well, I mean, before we get some advice, we should probably check in and see. And y'all have done some huge events just recently. As the time we're filming this, just a few weeks ago, you were at Dallas Motor Speedway. How many people? And tell us just a quick thing about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So we just finished a campaign called Together. It was October the 20th and 21st of 2018. And it was Texas Motor Speedway outside of Fort Worth. And we had almost 90,000 in attendance there inside the NASCAR track for a 2-day equipping and training event. Earlier in the year, in May, we were in the Vikings football stadium and had about 45,000 young people in attendance at that. And then earlier in the year, to back up, we did a 55-city tour called Winter Jam that we had almost 400,000 in attendance on that. So.
Wow. Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah.
And so just explain, what is PULSE? What are you guys? So something to do with events, I guess.
Yeah, so PULSE is a large-scale event-driven evangelistic organization. And so we do events all over the United States and the world. Our team actually is on their way to Russia right now as we're recording this video to do some events in Russia, and we're in Ukraine a couple weeks ago. And so we do, evangelistic events, training, and equipping.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And so what have you learned as part of a team? Because, to be clear, some of these events that you're putting on take years in the making. There's not like we planned for a month and then we're good to go, right? These are huge, well-thought-through events. We have recorded another episode where we talk a lot about what all's involved in that.
Sure.
So check that out if you're interested and haven't seen it. But so tell us more, though, about why is a small team better?
Yeah.
What do you mean when you say small? Because some people may hear that number and go, "That's huge."
Sure.
If we had 40 people, that would be amazing. So, but kind of break that down for us. What do you mean by small? And
so I think for us, and a lot of organizations, if you're watching this, you're probably thinking I wear different hats, depending, I'm, the fundraiser, or I'm, the person on stage, or then I'm the person setting up the tables, or whatever. And so for PULSE, I think the way that we are able to kind of run at the speed and the rate that we are operating in is we made a shift recently where we have functional roles in the organization. And so mine is a senior event director, which means, I oversee events and everything, the whole, from budgeting to the planning and everything of that. But then what we have matrix roles. And so when it comes to a campaign like a Together that you mentioned, or a Pulse Twin Cities, in that campaign, I report to a different person than I do in my functional role of the organization. And I am not an event director for that, but I may be overseeing a different area.
Okay.
And so for us, it's allowed to really give some clarity, because I think when you're trying to juggle these different events, and if you're trying to do multiple things, but you're still trying to report to the same people, they may not be involved in that particular event. And so for us, Winter Jam was 12 of our team for 4 months.
Okay.
Yes, some of the other team was overlapping every now and then, whether it was our graphics or communications. But so we all had a matrix role that I was the director of that event.
Okay.
And then everyone reported to me. Now, in the functional role, I report to my supervisor. So
Right.
it's different. And so, but it really helped us to break down this big, overwhelming thing to be able to see that for this particular campaign, you may only need 2 people because maybe it's just this really localized thing. And so we have different org charts and different roles and job descriptions for each of those actual matrix role. And so you get handed that role depending on what campaign you're involved in.
Interesting. So this functional role,
Yeah.
that's more like your official, I've been hired to
Absolutely.
do this kind of role.
Yeah.
But then as you're rolling through all these different events that have varieties of scales of needs, some are small and some are super huge,
Yeah.
you guys have figured out a way to kind of reposition your job titles as needed to fit that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I still have my functional role, and so I still weekly have a report with my supervisor about all things in my job.
Okay.
But then I'm involved in meetings based upon my matrix role. So for Together,
Yes.
I held the community engagement matrix role. So what does that mean? I was involved in getting the word out about Together at conferences, tours,
Right.
festivals, and events all across the United States. And so I was overseeing teams that would go on tours,
Right.
And I would be doing the contracts and the different things. And we were part of 163 separate events that were in front of 820,000 people promoting Together.
Crazy.
And so obviously that really doesn't have anything to do with my functional role, but under this campaign, it was the hat that I was wearing, for a lack of a better term.
Yeah, and the team realized we should get you in that role because out of all the things needed, that was the thing that you would have best been fit for.
Absolutely.
At the time.
Yeah.
And I think maybe a lot of organizations do this where they maybe jump to do this today.
Sure.
But they're not as official about letting you understand. So was that a conscious decision to kind of move from will you just help over here to kind of this matrix role decision? Like, how did that come about?
It was a very conscious, and it kind of was we had to rethink, honestly, how we were functioning, because it was very confusing because I was doing certain things over here and I kind of was taking reports from this person,
Right.
but I still had my supervisor. And so this really made it clear that no, on this campaign, and only that director of that campaign can give me work to do because they understand what I have on me.
Right.
And so if someone else in that campaign wants to come and pass them on, they have to go to them first because they understand the overall workflow. So it really, even though it seemed like it was extra work, it actually helped to make sure that we were all moving forward in the right direction, and nobody was, it gave a lot of clarity of who you were reporting to and who could speak into what you're supposed to be doing.
Right, because the tendency could be like, oh, this only takes an hour. But if you're in the middle and there's only this many hours left, that hour is really critical, right?
Yeah.
And so without having a clear understanding of what you're involved in, it probably has quite a bit to do with delegation of work and assignment of work.
Yeah.
Because you've got all these things that you guys are doing. How many events are you doing a year?
Almost 200.
Yeah, that's a lot. I don't know. I think there's like only a few more than that days in the year. So yeah. And so that's a lot. That's a lot of events. And so it's really easy for even small tasks to really pile up and become a huge thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So and how did that get rolled out? This matrix role concept to the team.
Yeah, it was definitely an all-staff meeting,
right?
I'd say it was multiple because it was just a totally different concept for us. We're like, because we do run at such a fast pace, and so there isn't a lot of time. Like, our team really steers away from meetings, and said, hey, only call a meeting if there's things that can't be done via email, text message, phone, only because your time's valuable, my time's valuable. We're all working on so many things. But it was multiple meetings of saying, like, okay, I know this seems to be as if really not necessary, but it's going to help us tremendously. And it has just been a game changer.
Wow.
Because it just gave so much clarity, and it gave so much understanding of reporting structure and
Right.
and who is overseeing this particular thing.
Yeah.
You know, because while we were doing Winter Jam, there's, you know, the Pulse Twin Cities event was still being planned together with still. So I'm in Winter Jam meetings, and then I'm in Pulse Twin Cities meetings, and then but in each of those I'm wearing a different hat, you know. And so at Pulse Twin Cities, I oversaw all of the gospel response, the collection of cards, and the training of volunteers and the ushers, and we did a pillow fight for the Guinness Book of World Records. So I actually worked with Guinness to collect. We had to count people that participated.
Wow.
And then I helped with an offering. And so my hat for that was just so different than anything else in other. And so, but I understood who I was getting that instruction from in that campaign. And so it allows these multiple things to be happening simultaneously, and still understand where your workflow is coming from and who to report that back to.
This is huge because we're talking about scaling.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of ministries will get to a certain spot, and then they'll kind of exist in that realm.
Yeah.
And they'll be good at it, but other opportunities will come their way, and it's like, oh, we can't do that. We can't handle that. But what we're talking about is as an organization, whatever it is, matures, it has to begin to develop and morph processes and things. Talk about ego, because when you know, some people get really excited about their title, and feel a lot of connection to a title.
Sure.
And essentially, what you're kind of talking about, because I mean, I would imagine your role title for your matrix role could be something that's not as appealing sounding as your real title.
Yeah.
How was that received within the team? I mean, I know
no,
everybody loves Jesus. And, I mean, I get it, but still, at the end of the day, there is ego involved. So
yeah, it was interesting. Yeah, you know, so my title is a senior event director, but every campaign I'm a part of has a different director. Sometimes I am still in that seat, but a lot of times I'm not, just depending on the scale of the event and where it needs to be taking place. And so, yeah, you know, it was interesting now that you mentioned that, just thinking back, I think everyone took it pretty well.
Okay.
And I think, you know, just another thing with our team, and I think it would be great for other teams to hear, it's like, I feel that our team runs really well in the lane that they've been assigned. And we run really fast in that lane. Like, I have a certain skill set that I was hired for to oversee and to do.
Right.
And so the team allows me to run in that and doesn't really, you know, hey, Bryant, we need you to go design a graphic for a flyer. We, you know, we have other team members that are and they're not asked to put together a budget for an event. And so, you know, with the matrix shows, with the function roles, and putting all egos aside, just learning how to run in your lane, and knowing that the people to your right and to your left are also running in their lane and giving their all in their certain areas. And so I think that really helps to maybe lower the ego, knowing that everyone is giving as much as you are, if not more, and is pushing you to be better, and is pushing you to go harder and to do more.
And I think in restriction, there's freedom. So like the more you can kind of define the boundary of what you are, then the easier it is to delegate things to that, because you understand where you start and where you stop within it. So it's a lot easier from a management perspective to be able to give something off, because you're not going to worry that the person who's the budget person is terrible at design is trying to do design work, right? Because they're outside of they're doing things outside of that. So it does seem like in that restriction there also becomes a lot of freedom, because there can be clarity on, like, this is what I'm asking you to do without every single detail, but you understand where the walls are of what you're supposed to operate.
Well, it's funny you mention that. There have been times with this new system that I almost feel like I maybe had too much freedom, but there was that trust of, like, no, you understand what's to be done here.
Right.
You have the gift set to do that, or if not, you're going to figure it out. It's still in what God's kind of gifted you with, and maybe it's not something I've done yet, but they're like, you have the ability to do that. And so there's been times where I've really asked my, you know, supervisor or the director's like, hey, are you okay with this?
Do you know what I just did?
They're like, oh man, it's awesome. You know? So I think, there's that freedom, and obviously it's developed so much more in me as a leader that that I wouldn't have, developed if it was more restricted and
Right.
people are like, oh, only let you do this part. But it's like, Brian, we want you to create, like let's take for Together, for example.
Yeah.
So I was involved in community engagement. Then the day of the event, I was over all the ushers. And so they're like, Brian, we need you to figure out how to collect an offering in a NASCAR track.
Right.
I'm like, yeah, let me Google that because
Right.
that's out there.
Right.
No, it wasn't. And so,
Right, of course
so
not.
I had to sit down with a map of the track and figure out how to place 80 stations and do a training with 960 people and place them and how to collect, just things like that.
Sure.
And so, but there's just a freedom to say, like, Brian, you can do this and come back to us with what you have, and then we'll speak into it.
Yeah.
And then being open to that critique, I think, as well, knowing that, and so we do also these things called walkthroughs. And so we did 3 for Together, where everybody comes for 3 to 4 hours. You present your plan.
Okay.
And then the team speaks into it.
Nice.
Yeah. And so it's painful. But yet by the time you get to the final walkthrough.
Wait, why is it painful?
Well, because you've worked hard to create this, and now people are telling you the holes in it that you thought you had thought through, but you've missed. And so that's where, once again, you're like, it is painful, but yet you're like, wow, why did I miss that? I should have thought that. But you go back. So the second walkthrough, you come back, and it's more dialed in, and people still find the hole. But then the third walkthrough, you're coming back, and you're like, man, this is the plan. And so when we got on the ground, we're able to run and to do that. So no, it's kind of a whole different thought process there, and we were talking about structures, but it's just another part of the process as we take these big things, break them down to be smaller, so that everyone has an understanding and able to speak into those things as well.
And it's cool when you're in a meeting and you understand the objective of the meeting is to poke holes in something. I mean, even though that's going to make it, I'm not sure I want to go into this, but you're going into it and realizing like, no, this is why I'm here, and we're better off because of the time that's been spent on this. Because could you imagine now that you've done the event, had those holes not been plugged, right?
It'd have been bad.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's still things that happen, right, in the actual event. We best laid plans, but
but I think what it does when is we plan, and so it allows us to adapt on site. And because there are going to those things that you mentioned that are going to come up that you haven't planned for, but if you haven't created a margin to be able to give yourself the ability to deal with that, because you're so down to the last minute trying to figure out how to make this work, then you can't adapt. You can't take time with those opportunities that come up. And
because if everyone is aware of the plan, then you're not having to communicate it in the moment, right?
Absolutely.
And so you're able to now make adjustments, and now you're just communicating the nuance of the change.
Absolutely.
Hey, instead of this, we're doing this small change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so for that Together, something that came up with that is with the ushers, we had a certain time that the offering is supposed to take place. And so you have all these people in the field that have been trained. They've got the buckets. They're ready to go.
Right.
Well, there was a program shift, and it moved by an hour.
Oh, wow.
And so then, I communicated on radios to my 7 section leaders, who then go communicate to all these volunteers all throughout the NASCAR track that, hey, I know you were about to go get ready to do this, but, so having the planning to go forward that you can then execute when those things come up. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Why was there not a NASCAR car driving around the racetrack at any given point?
I think it'd have been so loud. They're so loud. We had to up our sound budget.
Because Nick could have been in the NASCAR
He could have been in the car, yes,
with a megaphone.
He should have. We need to redo this.
Next time y'all need some great ideas, let me know. Well, that's great. So, I think so. Probably what I would summarize, and then you can summarize. But it seems like it's important to understand your role, and the role that you're kind of mainly made for. The functional role that you have of the organization may or may not be the final role that you actually end up doing for particular things, and it's okay to have maybe a higher or a lower role inside those different pieces, but all of this concept of functional and matrix roles come down to delegation of work, who can assign work to other people, because there's too much work to be done. So we've got to have some traffic cop that's ultimately deciding that, right? And then inside that, it's freedom of how much freedom can somebody have inside that role to then go with it and make decisions. Because the other thing you can't do in the small team is you can't micromanage all of this. You've got to let go of stuff because there's just too many details to think through the 7 people of the 10 people of the what, like to think through all those aspects of that. Someone else needs to be handling that. Yeah. So.
And I think, and that's where it gives, those younger leaders an opportunity to lead and to develop inside of them things that they didn't know existed, and things that they didn't see in themselves. And it allows them to, for that to come about. And so, I think that's for us, is where it really works, is because you're empowering younger leaders. And I think that's the thing too. It's like, it's one thing to say, I believe in you, I want you to go do this, but yet I do want to see exactly what you're doing, and I'm going to tell you what you did wrong.
Right.
It's another thing to say, hey, I believe in you, I want you to go do this, and I'm going to let you do it, and I'm going to put money behind you to do it.
Wow.
And then whatever the outcome is, we're going to be okay with it. And, so I think it's a different way of looking at it too. And the micromanaging is, it's impossible. You would, worry yourself. And so it is completely letting go, trusting in the people that, you have hired or put in those positions. And those positions could be volunteers. They could be interns.
Yeah.
They could be paid positions. It could be part-time positions. But, putting those right people in place and then entrusting that with them, letting go of it, and then seeing what God's going to do through them.
Sounds terrible and awesome, doesn't it? I mean, because we want to control things.
Absolutely.
We all have a desire to want to control and make sure that everything's right, which is really not exactly meaning like that. I'm not a psychologist, but usually isn't exactly that. Well, I hope this has been really helpful to everyone watching. And if you're considering moving from, or actually, I guess if you're considering how do we make our team do more without expanding our team like crazy, because we have so many projects going on, definitely look at this concept of functional roles versus matrix roles, and that may, in fact, just be the secret you need. And if that's still not doing it, then maybe the amount of control that you're trying to exercise over everything is just a little too much, and it's time to let go and see what happens. So I want to encourage you to do that. Go scale, go get bigger, go make everything more. And the world desperately needs what your ministry is doing to get out there in a bigger way. So go do it.
If you found this video helpful, share it with a friend. And subscribe to our YouTube channel. Make sure you hit that bell so you're notified for all of our future releases. Also, find and like us on Facebook. And we have a bunch of free resources for you at echoglobal.org/resources.